Hi, I'm Katherine Gray, founder of She Angel Investors and co-founder of the She Angels Foundation. I'm also the podcast host of Invest in Her and an award-winning producer, author, and TEDx speaker. Our show, Invest in Her, features phenomenal female founders and funders. As you know, women receive less than 2% of venture capital funding. Our series is about accelerating the funding of women by connecting them to funding resources. Let's meet today's guest. Welcome to this week's episode of Invest in Her. I'm your host, Katherine Gray, founder of She Angel Investors and co-founder of the She Angels Foundation, and more recently, the producer of Show Her the Money movie, which is about the underfunding of entrepreneurship for women. Very timely to our conversation today with the professor of entrepreneurship at UNC Asheville. Let's welcome to the show, Dr. Susan Clark. Hi, Dr. Susan. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, you and I met because there's going to be a screening in Asheville pretty soon. Asheville is one of my favorite cities in the country. Dear friends live there, and I just think it has been so beautiful. In fact, would you believe another film that I did years ago called I Can't Marry You? My friend that lives there, her family was featured in the film. It was about same-sex marriage, and we shot part of it at Asheville, and that's how I got to know your city. And then we were in the Asheville Film Festival when they had that there. So really good memories of Asheville. I bet you love living there. I mean, except for the fact that, of course, this destruction that has happened, and I know you all are rebuilding, but I know just like LA, you all will rebuild. Very resilient people, right?
Absolutely. The people of Western North Carolina, after Hurricane Helene, really came together. The community is absolutely fabulous, and we are rebuilding. There's a lot of economic need here, but I have all the faith in the world that we're going to make it happen.
And because you all will be screening Show Her the Money there, which, by the way, will be a fundraiser for Asheville, I'm proud to say. Thanks to my friend Jerry Goldberg, who does so much great work there with the Red Cross. Dear friend of many years, and I'm just cheering her and that organization on for the rebuild. And so we had the pleasure of meeting through the fact that we're setting up that screening there. And I just love the work you're doing. I thought you'd make a great guest for today's show because you're all about gender equity and entrepreneurship. You actually have written a book called Entrepreneurial Ecosystems, A Gender Perspective, and have won many awards for your work that you're doing in this arena. I noticed even you were recognized by the Stockholm, Sweden World Conference, ICSB, right? For a paper that you wrote about women in entrepreneurship. So, let's talk about that because you're the expert in this arena. So, why did you put a focus on that as a professor of business and entrepreneurship at UNC Asheville? What drove your passion about focusing on gender equity in this entrepreneurial world?
Sure. So a little bit of context. I'm an American political scientist. My Ph.D. from the University of California, San Diego is in American political science. And so I'm more of a macro scholar. I look at institutions, I look at culture, I look at society, I look at the big picture. And I really wasn't studying gender. I was studying corporate political strategy, and that was what my dissertation was on. And then I went to Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, before I came to UNC Asheville. And I was the only female entrepreneurship professor. And in the scholarship of entrepreneurship, in the field of professorship, it's very male-dominated, like it is in real life, in the venture capital world, and so forth. So that's when I started to notice this massive gap that you're very familiar with, the 3% club. Some years it's the 2% club. And so that has been my research trajectory for 13 years. And I really am looking at what are the barriers. So there are many kind of barriers to women getting the capital they deserve. Some of these are cultural barriers, so people's attitudes, people's beliefs about women, cultural conditioning that women internalize or that are projected onto them. And then there are structural barriers. So things like access to childcare or reproductive care. And there's this global database that a lot of scholars all over the world use called the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, or the GEM data. And just less than 2 years ago, I was at a national conference, USASB, the United States Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And I asked the question, are you asking women about their access to reproductive care? And guess what? That question is not asked. That is not in the database. So those are the kind of significant barriers, because if you have 12 children, it's pretty hard to scale your business. So that is, and it's something that's happening in America, some of the rollbacks in some of the states with access to reproductive care. And so these are the kinds of barriers. The word that was one in
Wait, can I ask you a question? What kind of questions do they ask men?
Well, they do keep it consistent. They do have gender now as a variable. They didn't 15 years ago. So gender, and actually the founder of the GEM studies, I asked him, and it was in Sweden back in 2011, and he didn't think gender was relevant. Well, it probably wasn't relevant to him, but it sure is relevant to
That's interesting.
Yes. So there has been some progress, but even in 2025, we still have not really moved the needle on gender equity and equity funding, which and so this is
that's why I wish there was more CEOs and business women owners, because their perspective is going to be, of course, focused on how do we help women with childcare and things of this nature. One of the things in our movie, Show Her the Money, is we did not hold back on showing that these entrepreneurs are women giving birth and raising children, and very proud that we brought that to the forefront, that they are doing that and successful business women at the same time, which is possible. But it also is so important that the corporations support that endeavor, right?
Yes, absolutely. And even women that choose not to have children or maybe can't have children are believed to be a liability still in 2025 because they might have children. So this is a very gendered barrier that exists in the corporate world, in the business world, and in the entrepreneurial world.
Right. Yeah. In fact, in our movie, one of the entrepreneurs said that she couldn't get funding because she literally had people say, well, are you going to be getting pregnant now that you just got married? Because we want to know if this is just a passion project. Meanwhile, her company now is worth about $800 million. So, the boys that think like that are going to miss out on some of the most dynamic women founders ever. And so it's a matter of getting culture to shift to realize the value and the brilliance of women that they would be losing out on if they didn't invest in them or hire them, right?
Exactly. And you pointed to a double standard, or alluded to it, about, are men asked that? Well, men aren't asked, do you plan to have children, in job interviews or when they're going up for equity capital, or how many children do they have, or how are they going to balance their fatherhood with their startup or they're scaling their venture.
They are not asked that. Right.
It's not even thought about. So a lot of these questions aren't blatantly asked. Sometimes they are, and then it's revealed. But there is, I think, this second guessing that's a real sticky problem that we as a society really need to make the shift on.
Right. Tell us about your book, The Entrepreneurial Ecosystem, a gender perspective.
Sure. I have a copy of it here, so I'll just show kind of what it looks like here. So this is Cambridge University Press. Came out in 2022, and last year in 2024, it's in paperback now, so a little better price point. It's available on Amazon. And this is a compilation of almost a decade of work with my colleague, Banu Askazant-Pan, who's at Brown University. And we look at 3 different levels in the ecosystem that matter for women getting money. One is at the individual level, all the individual level barriers, challenges, and so forth. Then there's the institutional and organizational level. So we look at entrepreneur support organizations. We look at not just them getting venture capital at that stage, or right before they get an IPO, but we look all the way back to the idea stage, the seed stage, all throughout the process of building up to getting venture capital or going for an IPO. There's mentorship, there's seed capital, there's resources, there's support, there's getting into accelerator programs, there's the experience women have in incubators and co-working spaces and so forth. And so we study the whole pathway, and we find there's not just one gaping hole. There are barriers and challenges and biases in the system all the way through. And this is what explains the 98% of venture capital that goes to male-only founders, is that whole stage, not just the final stage. So we're looking all the way through the system and identifying actionable steps and best practices that leaders can take to close the gap.
That's great. Somebody's got to do all this work. It gets, it's data and stats and that kind of information that helps make people aware, and then, challenges with how it's being done to make it better, right? I know you wanted to talk about, the new situation with DEI and the backlash for entrepreneurs and people that work at corporations. I know you're an authority on that, so let's talk about that.
Sure. So there has been a significant and profound cultural shift in the past 2 years that's really ramping up now. And it's largely political, it's political interest groups. So in the political context, this affects the context and the systems in which entrepreneurs start businesses and business leaders operate. And we're in a backlash stage now. So about around when George Floyd was murdered, we had Black Lives Matter. We had this huge commitment of the corporate world and universities and a lot of political institutions and nonprofits to finally talk about race, and as part of that, to just strengthen diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, across the board. So lots of new programming, lots of enthusiasm, lots of money going into these programs. And now we have a significant backlash. And this is happening now at the federal level with the new administration, but it's also happening at the state level, particularly in red states like North Carolina, where I'm a professor. And so me and my colleague Banu are interviewing folks that have leadership positions in this space, people that run their own DEI consulting, people in the corporate world, serial entrepreneurs, people like yourself that are investors, and trying to figure out what's going on, the why behind it, but also viewing it not just as a fearful backlash or feeling kind of victimized that it's being under attack, but how can we do things better next time? Like what perhaps the way things were phrased or done or implemented, how can we strengthen diversity, equity, and inclusion to be more inclusive and to be more effective and to perhaps get more folks on board and create less resistance or work through the resistance. So there's this collective moment right now where we're regrouping. And also we have to have consolidation. We have to have collaboration across the coast, bi-coastal and everything in between. This can't just be, a grassroots is awesome, but we need to have a concerted effort to respond to this backlash.
And, here's the thing. It's a story that people tell themselves. They say, oh, people are being hired just because they're a person of color or LGBTQ or they're a woman. And that is not the case. The case is that people weren't being hired because of who they were, and you were leaving a lot of talent on the table. And what companies who've embraced the DEI have found is that bringing in women to their board or their C-suite or just jobs in general, and people of color and LGBTQ, makes it look more like the rest of the world. And there's brilliant people in every one of those sectors I just mentioned. And so you're leaving a lot of brain power and brilliance on the sidelines if you're not bringing them into your team. And DEI was created for that purpose. And I think a lot of people don't grasp that. They just think you're filling a spot to say you have someone of diversity on your team, when in actuality, you're trying to make your team better, smarter, have more of a uh, a process of thoughts that runs the gamut of people instead of just one type of person's thought process, which could never be as brilliant or robust as everyone pooling their ideas and talent together. And some companies embrace that and have been very successful because of that. And others have fought it. And this is the backlash that's happening, I believe. And so it's a matter of getting people to understand the value in it. In venture capital, women are getting 2%, like we've talked about. It's why we made the movie Show Her the Money. Not because they're not smart, not because they don't have great innovations that'll impact the planet, but because people haven't wanted in that venture capital space, which is very male dominated, to support women. And so we have to make a conscious effort to raise awareness about this and say, this is going to affect men and women if we don't fund these great ideas and innovations, right? So it fits everyone to participate in the DEI and maybe call it something else if people are opposed to that, right?
Sure. And I think that's actually a really, really interesting occurrence that we aren't funding women and that corporations aren't all over this, because the research shows that there's just no questioning it. The vast majority of research shows, and there's a causal link too. When you have diversity, you have different perspectives, you have more innovation, and innovation translates to financial performance. So there's been multiple study after multiple study that shows that there's higher financial performance, that women are outperforming male-founded companies in many respects. And so to not fund them is just a financial, you're missing the boat. And so you're not going to profit off these. You're not going to return an investment to your either your shareholders or your investors.
If you limit yourself to just a certain sector of people. Absolutely.
That's right. And yet we're still having this huge gap. So it's this almost irrationally in the system. And what I really attribute to, there's lots of different factors, but it's the zero-sum game thinking. It's that if a woman gets a spot at the table or gets the funding, then that means a male or a white person or a straight person isn't going to get the money. So we have to change that. So growing the whole pie versus thinking the political thing is thinking, oh, who's going to get the bigger segment and we have to fight for it. The research shows that when you fund more, everybody benefits. And it's not just men and women, but children's communities.
Yes. It builds more wealth and makes the pie bigger.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And, the thing is in venture capital, it's why we've created things like our Silicon Valley Women Founders Fund that's funding women in tech who have all these incredible ideas that will impact the planet and affect everyone, men, women, children, like you said. So we're saying to people, you might feel like your hands are tied, but there are things you can do. You can vote with your money. You can invest in things like venture capital and angel investing and get behind things that you believe in that not only will help build your wealth, but will also make an impact in the world. And so that is something no one can stop us from doing. Like, we can do that. And that's what I love about that. We can take it into our own hands to help change that by voting with our money and making those type of investments.
Yes, perfect. And I see a huge place for women-only spaces, for women-only funds. There are some risks or potential downsides to that I think everybody need to be aware of. I think there's like an exit strategy, right? So women, I hear all over the place, are so frustrated with being told no, with the bias they encounter, with the second guessing, with the condescension and all of the things that women face when they're trying to get capital. So they go to women-funded investors like yourself and then go through those funds. Now, there is some research that suggests that later, if you get female-targeted funds from whether it's a female fund or a fund that is focusing on funding females, there is some risk that in later stages of the capital process that they're more likely to not get funded. So, and the reason why the research shows is that there's this assumption, again, a lot of this is unconscious. It's not something that's stated, that the only reason they got funding are because they're women. So it's that affirmative action, kind of what you mentioned before, of they think, well, you're really not venture capital ready. You only got that early stage seed funding because you're a woman.
But who are we talking about? The 2% that got the money? I mean, so the shift has to be that, and this is what I'm working on, is that more women need to invest in venture capital. That's what's going to move the needle. They're coming into trillions of dollars in the coming decade. What are they doing with that money? Our movie, Show Her the Money, and other things out there, other amazing groups out there, are educating women on why they should invest in venture capital. So then they decide who gets the money. The reason that women aren't getting the money is it's just men deciding who gets the money. But there's also a lot of men out there that have become aware, especially men that are not in the venture capital world, but are in other businesses, that this underfunding of women is ridiculous in venture capital, and they want to invest in women. So men are investing now in women founder funds that invest in women because they see, like you said, the data shows that they tend to be more successful, more efficient with money, exit earlier. And so they are starting, especially, like I said, outside the venture capital world. Maybe they're in the insurance business or the building business or a lawyer or whatever, that there is an opportunity to actually build wealth by investing in funds that invest in women. And for instance, my fund, Silicon Valley Women Founders Fund, is run by me and a gentleman, John Majeski, who worked in corporate venture for Dell and Lenovo and HP. And so women-founded funds can be run by both men and women. And we are deciding which which entrepreneurs have the most innovative and groundbreaking ideas that will disrupt technology. And if we don't invest in women's ideas, the world will suffer from it. You'll be missing the boat, not only missing building wealth, but missing out on technologies that otherwise won't occur because they're the ones with that great, brilliant idea. And so why wouldn't we want to invest in all the best ideas, no matter who they are, no matter if it's a man, a woman, if they're BIPOC, if they're LGBTQ. I'm not a proponent of investing in people just for the sake of investing in them because of what they are, but investing in them because they have the best, most innovative ideas that will impact the world. And that's the way we need to think. We need to think, let's invest in the best of the best ideas and not look at it under a gender lens, which I think is what your work is about.
Yes. And also, in addition to that, we need to make those that get funded and that are high performing and the success stories very visible. So thank you for your documentary in that. Because one of the things that happens when you have equity investment at early, particularly before the IPO, is that there's this asymmetric information. So the investor doesn't know about you. And so they're really using what are called heuristics or cognitive shortcuts to make that investment decision, their gut feeling. And so it's not just about the data and what the projections are, but they're really saying, well, does this look like an entrepreneur that I would want to, even if they're not asking themselves that, they're really looking at what exists out there in their impressions of who a successful entrepreneur is. And who do we have? We have Steve Jobs, we have Elon Musk, we have Jeff Bezos, we have all of the white male founders that are being portrayed in the media as that's what an entrepreneur is. And so even if it's not cognizant or conscious, people think that females aren't like true entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs. And so we need to showcase these. We need to get these in the media. So that
right. And thank goodness for some of these women that are now being showcased as, real trailblazers in the entrepreneurial world, so that we are getting those heroes that we can look at. And, to your point, and I did this TED Talk called Fund Women Save the World that is about people do tend to invest in people they identify with. So if it's a male and he doesn't identify with the woman founder or her product, he probably won't invest in it. and vice versa. So, that's why we need more women sitting at the table deciding who gets the funding. They're more likely to identify with that founder and with that product, which is very important to everything from women's health to the environment to all things, childcare, things that women care about. And so, yeah, it's really an interesting conversation that we're having here. And of course, you've been doing a lot of research on this for many years and teach this. I'd love to know what your class is about at UNC Asheville. What do you teach in entrepreneurship?
Sure. So I teach the intro to entrepreneurship. I teach social entrepreneurship, which is using entrepreneurship and business principles to solve serious environmental and social problems. And then I teach an applied entrepreneurship class. So this is like a capstone where the students are working on a rapidly scaling startup for the entire semester on different aspects of the business. So that's what I teach here. And I do just want to say that another really big important thing for getting economic equity in the equity space is the political power. So I mentioned I started out as a political scientist. Who controls the political agenda? Who are powerful in politics? If you watched any part of the inauguration or saw it in the New York Times, it's the owners of capital. It's the very successful entrepreneurs that have an inordinate amount of political influence. And so when women get equity in the economic realm, when they're the owners of capital and running these large tech companies and platforms and media companies, there will be more equitable political representation and political influence. And that affects all aspects of life, reproductive health to economic equality to all of it. So it's really, for me, I'm a political economist. So I think there are political aspects here of equality that absolutely require economic equality.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. So important that we invest in these women in tech and other sectors as well, but to build that powerful presence that they're making on the planet and being recognized for that so that as you said, you have that political pull. So yeah, ladies, we have to rally around men. You have to rally around women innovators. This is what's going to help shift things. You might feel like your hands are tied, but we can vote with our money. And we do every day. Women impact more than 80% of the buying decisions. We need to be impacting more of the investment decisions. That's what will create the real wealth and power. And glad that we are on that horizon and I think headed in that direction as we raise awareness about how to actually make this shift. So thanks for bringing up this conversation today, Susan. Really appreciate having you on. I'm so glad that Chandra Russell from Mad Genius Studios brought us together and is showing the film Show Her the Money in Asheville. Excited about that. Really appreciate her doing that and connecting us so that we could have this discussion today on this platform. Susan, how do people reach you?
My email is best, so SMUNTEAN@unca.edu, or you can Google Susan Clark Muntean and see some of the books and scholarship on this subject matter and reach me that way. So thank you very much.
What about LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn. So Susan Clark Muntean, I believe there's only one of me with that long last name. And so definitely LinkedIn's a great place to connect as well.
Okay, Dr. Susan, and I'm just going to spell your last name for those that are just listening. It actually is Muntean. So you can find Susan on LinkedIn. You can also find me, Catherine Gray, Catherine with a C, Gray with an A. We have this weekly podcast with amazing guests every week to bring you resources to help you with both your investments and your entrepreneurship. So thanks for tuning in, and also check us out on our social and our website for Show Her the Money movie. I'm also at sheangelinvestors.com for keynotes and other, and also Show Her the Money can be seen either virtually or in your city. We're going to be in Asheville soon. And
March 27th is a Thursday evening.
27th. Beautiful. Looking forward to that. People can get tickets on our website, showherthemoneymovie.com. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Make it a great week. Thank you, Dr. Susan. And we appreciate having you on today.